Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the SWestrans Board, Friday the 29th of November 2024. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and the public recording will be made available on the website for public listening following this meeting. Remote participants on Teams, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting. Speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute, but I will look out for virtual hands as well. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. Please speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Board members will have received a copy of an urgent item of business yesterday that I have agreed to take. Given the subject matter, I intend to take this item as the first substantive item of business today after item 3. So we'll go through the agenda Item 1, said the written apologies. Claire.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We've got 6 board members present today. I've received apologies from Councillor Wood. We have yourself and Councillor Scobie present here in the Council Hall, with the Vice Chair and Councillors Dempster and Walters on Teams. And we also have Stephanie Mottram, our NHS representative, on Teams. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. Do any board members have any declarations they wish to make? Don't see anyone coming in. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting on the 27th of September 2024. This is for approval. Are we happy to approve? I'll take silence as consent. So I did say that I would take the urgent item, which is item 12, any other business deemed urgent by the Chair due to the need for a decision. I have agreed to take this item of business. It's the lead officer's arrangement to consider this report. It is recommended that the board agree to consider this item of business in private and exclude the press, members of the public and observers from the meeting, given the report contains confidential or exempt information in respect of paragraph 1 of Schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Board members, can we agree to exclude the press, the public and observers?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm getting nods in the room. Thanks very much. And welcome back. We've concluded our discussions. Did have a bit of issue there trying to get the Vice Chair, but I see she's joined us now. So we'll proceed with the rest of the agenda. So agenda item 4, which is the board membership update. Claire, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. Only to correct an error at 2.1 of the report where our NHS representative is, of course, Stephanie Mottram. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. So I'll open it up to the board members. Any questions? Don't see anyone coming in. Any of the observers? Don't see anyone coming in. With that, we'll just go to the recommendations. So it was to note that confirmation was received on the 30th of September 2024 that the Cabinet Secretary for Transport had approved the reappointment of Karen Jackson. Oh, I see. Is that somebody coming in? Jim, was that just a thumbs up?
Yeah, just to say I support that, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. To reappoint the reappointment of Karen Jackson on behalf of the South of Scotland Enterprise to the SWestrans Board. Now move on to agenda item 5, which is the South West Coastal Path. Grant, do you have anything to add?
Nothing further to add, Chair, thanks.
Thank you very much. So I'll open it up to board members, and unless have you got somebody coming in?
I have Georgia Bell from Stantec was online to do a quick presentation and for board members, and if we've got any questions they can ask her at the end.
Thanks, Grant. So members happy to get a short presentation from Georgia. Well, good morning, Georgia.
Good morning.
Just go ahead on your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. We've recently carried out a study of the Greta Kinryan coastal path and assessed and tried to monetize certain cost-benefit ratios to help SWestrans with decision making for the coastal path. So I'll just run through what we carried out and how. So the scope of the study was a very short study. It was a 7 weeks intense work. We prepared a high-level strategic business case based on Transport Scotland methods for business cases for transport, called the 5Ks model. We did a prioritisation exercise of the whole coastal path and proposed some suggestions for phasing of works. We used existing data, so we did not do any data collection. We did a literature review of similar studies with other parts in the UK, including Five Coastal Path, the West Highland Way, and the Welsh coastal path, and used available data. So we were commissioned to look at feasibility and cost-benefit ratios for a coastal path going from Gretna to Kinryan along the Dumfries and Galloway coast to bridge the gap in between the coastal path in Ayr and Ayrshire and to hopefully improve possibilities for businesses along the proposed path. So we proposed 5 strategic cases. The first one is qualitative. We looked at the policy context and how the coastal path could contribute to national and UK and Scottish policies. And so the vision for Dumfries and Galloway is to become a renowned destination for its long distance coastal path. It's about 500 kilometres of route that we've assessed. celebrating the region's strong heritage, its compelling character as nature, and hopefully linking all the quality services and future services that the community along the path can provide. We looked at the social economic case for identifying potential benefits, and this is why the exercise where we try to monetize the benefits of this 500 kilometers of route. This is a qualitative list of the environmental, health, economic benefits that such a route could take, and this is bring to the region, and this is what we used as a baseline for what we tried to monetize, and I'll talk you through it briefly. First, we looked at health economic assessments of the route. We used the census data for local population along the route, and we basically asked the tool, we used the health economic assessment tool, which is an established tool for carrying out this type of exercises. So we asked if SWestrans and SWestrans Council were successful in securing a £2 million investment across this project, and a 30% increase in more people locally to use the path, to do more regular walking for 30% more time than what they already do. What impacts would that have on the local population in terms of health, and essentially how much saving would that bring to the government? And we found that 3.8 premature deaths are preventable each year. That would be over a 10 years period of time, 38 premature deaths, with an economic value, a total economic impact of 85 million saving. So that would bring you a cost ratio of a 2 million spending for an 85, almost 86 million savings over a 10 years period. We also looked at parts of the routes are potentially cyclable. So we looked at what type of infrastructure would have the maximum impact. So we looked at different interventions, minor interventions, which is possibly just signage, against major interventions, which is actual infrastructure, and the impact that could have. This is on cycling alone. This is going to be possibly predominantly a walking route. What we wanted to include cycling as well, and this assessment gave us an indication of how many car kilometres from the road could be taken away from roads, and how much more cycle trips per year we could potentially achieve, both for leisure and for everyday journeys. We then looked at tourism information we had available. We looked at footfall and possible spending projections. So our model showed that for a 700,000 overnight stays in 2019, over 1 million could be forecasted for 2030, and that relates to 122 million spent for 2019, with a projection of 300 million forecasted for 2030, and this is on overnight stays only. We looked at a recreational expenditure model. Again, this is for cycling only, so it just outlined the potentials for promoting the cycling aspect of some of the segments of the route. And then we looked at the social impact, meaning if the community and community groups, how could they benefit from utilising the route? And that gave us a return on investment of 4.8 to 1 spend on the basis of a 2 million investment, which is encouraging. We then looked at a commercial case. Again, this is qualitative, and it's recommendation for procurement methods for SWestrans or the council on how to take forward the works with advantages and disadvantages for each procurement route. We then looked at the financial case, which shows, depending on the level of investment that it's possible to make on a more holistic base. So not just infrastructure, but looking at behaviour change, looking at softer measures, health, etc. We just showed how if in 2025 on a 3-year programme, £213 were spent per head, so per person, the population of Dumfries and Galloway, then 10 paths could be improved. 5 substantial barriers like bridges could be addressed. 11 behavioural change programmes could be delivered. 10 schools could be engaged with. An increase of engagement with workplaces. You could potentially target 50,000 people of the local population, and then we made a forecast of new cycling trips, including leisure, and a forecasted number of new walking trips. And we produced a kind of forecast for a 3-year programme of investment. And then this is the route has assessed. We segmented the route in segments that could provide an origin and destination in itself, so that they could be walked or cycled or on their own without having to do the whole 500 kilometres. And this is what we came up with. We assessed them against a series of items, including safety, whether each segment of path is accessible for all, whether the paths were accessible for wheelchairs, prams or not, whether they were accessible for all sorts of biking, or whether it was more like an off-road biking type of segment, what services it provides. And then we counted the hospitality businesses along each segment, and we tried to address feasibility and maintainability of each segment, and that gave us an idea of how each segment could be prioritised in the years to come in terms of delivery. The main parts I highlight here are the ones that you can see in red. Those are the identified gaps where there isn't any sorts of infrastructure, any path at all at the moment. So those are probably the segments that would need more feasibility and assessments and work, but the rest, the paths are there. It's just a matter of improving what is there. Hopefully I was able to give a bit of a very high level overview of what we've done, but I'd be happy to take any questions. Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much, Georgia. I'll open it up to board members. Any questions from board members? Now, I've got 2 hands up at the moment. I've got Councillor Keith Walters and then Vice Chair Karen. So Keith.
Thanks very much, Georgia, for the presentation. Will we be able to get a copy of this? Because the last map especially was quite interesting. Some of the things were already covered in the report we'd got, but the map at the end was particularly interesting to see where you've identified the gaps for the cycling and the walking. When you just going back to what you've said about the health benefits, the health economics side of things, is that something, this one, yeah, the health economic assessment then. So is that based on the inhabitants of Dumfries and Galloway, or is it based on the people who are going to be drawn to Dumfries and Galloway if we promote this route sort of nationally? And that's one question. The other question is perhaps a bit more niche, but there doesn't seem to be much comparison between this route and the Southern Upland Way, which is, I know it has differences and it's not coastal, but it has quite a lot of similarities in that it is across Dumfries and Galloway. It's a long distance route. You know, we're trying to make it appeal to people nationally as a sort of challenge. So I was interested. Did you have any chance to compare the progress with Southern Upland Way with what might happen with the coastal route? That's my two questions. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank you very much.
Georgia, just before you come in, I've also got Brian Scott as well as Grant and yourself that could answer any questions. So Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you very much. The first question is probably for Grant as to whether the report and when it will be shared. So Grant, I'll let you answer that one perhaps before I take the other two answers.
Thanks, Georgia. Yeah, more than happy to share that, Councillor Walters. Also, that report, which is fantastic in the short space of time that we asked Georgia to complete it, it also has a significant number of appendices, including a large number of different GIS mapping, which I believe has been very beneficial for Brian and his team. And it's really interesting pieces of work that we can send through to you electronically, along with the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. I'll take the other two questions. So in terms of the health economic assessment, the answer is this specific model is based on the local population. So we were trying to understand the health benefits to the local health board specifically. It would have proved a little bit more complicated and we did try to understand if we could account for the number of visitors because of the health data available. So we tried to use UK-wide health data, population health data, but the model just wasn't responding well because the data we had were way too high level. The way that the model works, you have to look at different types of demographics and different types of age, social, economic aspects, as well as health spending and what they call the value of statistical life. So we did try, but in the short amount of time we had, with the available data we had, publicly available data, we weren't able to produce an entire model for visitors. Also, we would have only been able to generate something for UK visitors, whether hopefully this would generate like international, would have an international appeal as well. So the answer is no, we only had a look at the local population and savings to the local NHS board. And for as per the other question, no, that was out of scope for this commission. We looked specifically at two other coastal examples because there was a methodology that was similar to this, and then we looked at some data for the West Highland Way, but we didn't look at the Southern Uplands Way. think there might be another question.
Has that been helpful, Keith?
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Georgia.
Thanks very
Thank
much. I've got Vice Chair Karen Jackson, followed by Jim Dempster, then Willie, and then we'll go to the observers. So, Karen.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Georgia, for that presentation. Really exciting and lots of potential there. I guess it's in a similar, in a similar vein to Councillor Walter's questions, particularly around learning from long distance routes in the region. So obviously we've had the Kirkpatrick coast-to-coast cycling route launched relatively recently. Were you able to take any learning from there, particularly from the economic and tourism benefits? Because obviously there was a lot of work done there. And I think I've probably raised this question when we saw some of the maps last time, and it's probably not a question for you, but for DGC colleagues, and that's about the interaction with South Scotland Destination Alliance. Again, a real opportunity, and I get this is at a really early stage, but an opportunity to bring them in because obviously they've done brilliant promotion work around the coast-to-coast cycling route. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. We haven't looked at numbers for other examples. We didn't have numbers for the coast-to-coast example, but we did do a mapping exercise where it is mapped. We did map all the more extended core path network. We did map the local NCN route. So this is a bit of a diluted version of the mapping. We did look at how this would intersect and interconnect with what is already either planned in the pipeline or already on the ground. So yes, but only on a visual and mapping GIS exercise. I hope that helps.
Yes, that is helpful, and I guess it's that kind. Once this starts developing further, it's how the two interact and add benefits to each other. So really complementary and could really drive particularly kind of economic benefits. So no, exciting potential there.
Thanks, Karen. I've got Councillor Dempster. Jim.
Thanks, Chair. I have a couple of questions on the report itself, which I presume you'll take later. This is just a discussion on the presentation, and it's in relation to the Southern Upland Way. I live in Sanquhar, which is on the Southern Upland Way, and on average there are 1,000 long distance walkers that do the coast to coast walk, and it's become difficult to promote, and it's become clear that most folk want to do sections or segments. And in fact, recently the Southern Upland Way had been broken down into 3 segments to try and encourage walkers to come and do a segment or a section. And that's also to try and encourage people to come and live locally rather than carry tents, etc., do the long distance walk. So it would seem to me the likely target client base will be segment walkers rather than the whole coast to coast walk. And I understand why the coast to coast walk is being promoted. I just think we need to be maybe have a more in-depth analysis of who the clients might be and which part of the walk they might do, and understand that this is a high level report today. I just worry that although we're trying to create a Gretna to Stranraer walk, it'll be segments that will be the most popular elements, I would think, of it. Thanks. And there's an observation, Chair, rather than a question.
No, it's a really, really good observation, and I apologise. I actually perhaps didn't highlight that aspect. The wider point of this paper and this study was exactly that, to promote something that is broken in segments, and each segment has an origin and destination with hospitality and services and potentials, and the assessment and prioritization exercise that we produce looks at all those elements to try and understand which segments might have more potential rather than others. And also this study is supported by 2 feasibility studies that were produced in the past and look exactly at how these segments work. So, Grant, I'll let you take the question in terms of what's the aspiration, but in terms of how we've built this study, it is based on the segments and how the majority of the people will only do parts, one or more segment, rather than the whole route. The whole route is extremely long, it's 500 kilometres. So I think, Grant, do you have any more to add?
Yeah, thank you, Georgia. We're also looking to focus on accessibility for these routes for certain segments, as Councillor Dempster also pointed out, that there are segments that might be a lot more suitable for accessibility to try and so that everybody can use these walking routes.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Jim. I'll take Councillor Scobie, Willie next, and then I'll go to observers.
I think maybe my question has been answered by Jimmy in terms of comparison to the Southern Upland Way. And my question, or Georgia, was what did you mean by minor and major interventions? And I'm now taking it that would be segments and making it accessible to people. But my question would be, I remember being in a meeting in Kilmarnock many years ago, and a gentleman there talked about, you know, he loved to go cycling, and he'd love to come to Dumfries and Galloway to cycle, but what he found was he couldn't get here. So in your Stantec study, did you look at how people got here in terms of the bus network, you know, in getting your bike on and off the bus or even train, as trains is even more difficult than what we've got in the bus network. So it's really looking at accessibility in getting here to then access some of these routes, because I think Jimmy made the point in terms of comparison, the Southern Upland Way is far too long and you need to break it down. So equally, we need to break down the whole 500 kilometres. And already I'll come back on the report, Chair, if that's okay. But it's just to, have you looked at how people get here and what the bus network is, then to go further on some of these segments?
Yes.
Go ahead, Georgia.
Yes, thank you very much. That's another really crucial point. Again, there was a feasibility study that looked at that more in depth. So we took what was found and took it further. So what the segments highlight is that because they do start or end either at a point where there's a suitable bus stop or a lay-by car park, or there's a train station. Again, the train stations are a limited number within the route, but yes, so we did look at that. Each of these segments would probably need, with the phasing, like further, there's an iterative process to either improve or either majorly improve, or with infrastructure, actual hard infrastructures, or signage or software improvements. At that point, that is when the different feasibility of how to get people there, what the options are in terms of sustainable transports are. But as a high level study, each segment starts and ends either at a bus stop, a station, or where there's a lay-by for parking. And then, yes, accessibility. There are two aspects to accessibility. You're right. So we did look both at accessibility in terms of equality, diversity, and inclusion. So for people to with different needs to be able to perhaps do some of those segments, not all. Also, not all the segments will be cyclable, depending on what type of bikes people might be able to use. There are a lot of other interconnections with cycling, because the Dumfries and Galloway has got 7 sites for mountain biking. There's a lot of different types of cycling happening in the region. So again, that should be looked into more detail at feasibility for each segment. I would assume.
Thanks, Georgia. I don't think Councillor Scobie was happy with the response, but I'll bring him back in.
I think we've got to look at what the connections are, and more so in the bus network. I see Grant's wanting to come in here. When you refer to rail, are we snigger there? Because if we look at the two rail links, the only one is at the beginning, either the beginning or the end at Dumfries, and it goes north, and at Stranraer, it goes to Dunrugget and again goes north. So there is no rail link in the whole of the proposed coastal network other than at the start and the end, but not linking in with any of the coastal route. So I think we do need to look at how people get here, and once they're here, how they do then access some of the routes. I don't know if Grant can add in. I want to come back on the report, Chair.
Yeah, Grant.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure how we can get railway lines to the coast, but we'll try. That's all I'm going to say. There's a lot of work going on in the round, Councillor Scobie, whereby there's a lot of studies, strategies, parking strategies, local bus reviews to try and help with the connectivity. There's active travel studies also going on. And so there's a lot there, and we're looking to that all be encompassed along with the high-level study of this, so that we start connecting places and people. And we recognise that that's important. There's no point in having a coastal path if they can't get to it. So we're looking at how we can try and do that. And as I say, there's a lot of work going on, a number of different services, but we're all working together to try and put something together, make it more cohesive. You joined up.
Thanks, Grant. Yeah, I mean, I don't suppose it's something that that this report can sort of address. I think it's got to be a bigger picture that needs to be addressed, and possibly other partners coming in to try and see if we can get some kind of, routes that take them to the coast, where they can start their, the coastal walk or coastal cycle, whatever it is that they intend doing. But yeah, I mean, it has been an issue with rail. Rail doesn't go across east to west. That's always been a big problem for a number of years, since the 60s. So I can't see us putting a railway line east to west and then branch lines go down to the coast. I don't see that happening, Willie, but yeah, I do take your point. But saying that, I mean, there are things that we could look at, like, for instance, facilities on the buses to allow people to take their bikes, so if a bus is going to a coastal area, and then maybe that's something that can be looked at. So, but again, everything has to be taken in the round. But I don't think it can be done in this report itself, Willie. Do you want to come back in?
Yeah, just on the report, Chair, we can all live in hope that we'll get a rail from Stranraer to Dumfries at some time. I only hope we can improve the roads, or the 77 and the 75, before we even start talking about rail, that we improve the road network, or at least bring it up to dual carriageway as it should be. However, I'm looking at the report, and I'm looking at delivery 4.1 through to about 4.4. And it's the difficulty of accessibility to these coastal walkways. And I think it's highlighted in here in terms of the paragraph 4 on page 2, where we've had £1.2 million awarded, I think, through the National Lottery. And yet it's so expensive. We looked at the Mullagalloway to Stranraer, or at least Sandhead to Stranraer, trying to get that open for a trail run, a 10k trail run this year, which they managed to do. and to be applauded for it. But the ambition is to have a Mulla Galloway to Stranraer marathon trail run for next year, next September 2025. And that's proven really hard in terms of keeping the route, the coastal route open and accessible. So how we're going to do it in terms of the 500 kilometres when we're having difficulty in terms of the Rins coastal pathway on what is 120. So it's this whole ambition. It was disappointing to read the letter from the Scottish Government, the civil servant, that didn't want to recognise it in its STPR2, as this is an ambitious project. It's got huge attraction if we can get the network sorted and getting people here. So I would hope that we do go ahead with it, because it is ambitious, but it's something that would be a huge attraction, and hopefully we could be successful on the National Lottery Heritage bid to progress this. And I just wonder what progress is being made on that in terms of getting a bid to submit to it. And I know that there's in the recommendation it's to consider capital expenditure or in the June meeting of 2025. Are we making any progress in the National Lottery bid and looking at match funding?
Yeah, thanks, Willie. I believe this is it a 5-year project? But Grant, if you can assist Willie.
I think I don't want to pass a buck here, Chair, but I think Brian Scott is there to answer.
Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just in response to Councillor Scobie's question, the coastal route is part of the bigger Solway Coast and Marine project, and we submitted a stage 1 application to the National Lottery Heritage Fund last Thursday, and we're due to hear the outcome of that application in March 2025. Also, just to add, to respond to some of the previous questions as well, this study it's not the only study that's been done on this route. We've been working bit by bit on the whole coastal route for probably the last decade. And as Councillor Scobie said, we tried to break this down into segments to actually deliver it in a realistic way. So we secured funding again from the Heritage Fund and Heritage Lottery and other funding sources to do the RINS section. So this study in effect put more sort of facts and figures on what we need to achieve for the rest of the route, building on the existing core path network. So I think that, it's really promising work, and I think we'll add more to the evidence for other funding bids as well, in addition to the lottery. In terms of segmentation as well, lots of other long distance routes throughout the UK. The majority of users that use long distance routes are actually do sections of routes. So it's usually a minority of users that do the whole route, and as has been pointed out, more as a challenge than as leisure or commuting between places. So the scope for the local population and visitors is immense, really, because some sections will be used more than others, and you've still got the option to actually doing an end-to-end route as well. And finally, on terms of I think Councillor Scobie mentioned about maintenance. Yes, it is always a problem, but I think that's a problem with all local authorities. And we are starting to look at options to working with communities, how best to manage existing routes and new routes. through different mechanisms and not just through the council.
Thanks, Brian. I've got. Do you want to come back in, Bully?
No, it's just pleasing to hear what Brian's saying in terms of bringing in the communities and in terms of its maintenance and keep them accessible. It's good to know that, you know, the west of the region is being recognised here.
I think that's duly noted. Okay, if there's no... I've got one more board member before I go on to the observers. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. I hope that it wasn't an exasperated because it's wanting to speak to you again. No, I take it now we're talking about the report itself and not the presentation. And I'm pleased to see that capital and revenue are being considered together, because there's nothing worse than creating a path and then watch it simply dissolve back into nature or be poorly maintained. So I'm pleased to see that's happening. The discussion about segments is great, because that's what it should be. I don't quite sign up to Willie's involving the communities, because the communities have a capacity and sometimes it's very limited, and we should not be developing what would be a multi-million-pound path and then somehow ensure that it's maintained to a degree that makes it possible. And the last thing I'll say is about the recommendations, and I know we'll come to that eventually. I'd be concerned if we were talking about committing to a 10-year programme of match funding. We don't know what will happen this year, never mind in future years, especially with the proposed cut from the Scottish Government that SWestrans is about to suffer, I think, for what a better term. But that'll maybe come in a discussion and recommendations. I'd want to come back at that stage, Chairman. But aye, thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Right, I'll go to Laura Moody, who's been waiting very patiently. Laura, please come in.
That's fine. Thank you very much. I've got a few technical points first, based on the report, and then a question and a comment that kind of builds on what's been said already. On the technical points, figure 3.1 on page 16/18 on the PDF of the report is really blurry. It's resolved later on when you get the section by section elements, but it's not very helpful where it is. So kind of if we can get that replaced or removed, it might make sense. Also, Bright House Bay through the document, it should actually be Brig House Bay. I live nearby, so I think that's just an overzealous proofreading. Also, I used to work as a grant administrator for Foundation Scotland, and I noticed the ANCBC fund was mentioned. I actually think you'd find difficulty getting funds from that fund, not just with the statutory challenge, but also geographically. Almost all of the areas in that fund are inland. I think Kingham Quay is probably the closest to the coast. But there is another fund administered by Foundation Scotland called Kilgalliac, which has actually funded some community-led project work on the Rins Coastal Path and other bits of coastal path. I think they supported some rotary work and some work on signage at the Mulberry Harbour in Garliston. So that might be a place to look. They would fund sort of community-led elements of the work. My question, on page 40/42, the Greenway from Millhall to Kirkcudbright, phase 3 and ranked 30th, but it's described as a priority section. So I'm assuming the reason it's ranked 30th, despite being a priority, is because of the amount of negotiation anticipated with landowners before you can get that far. Is that right?
Thanks,
Thank you.
Laura. Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, there's a few things in there. The report you have is low res. I'm afraid there is a high resolution version. It was just not possible to send it through via email if we had sent that, but we can send out a higher resolution one, no problem. We will make the amendments that you mentioned, so thank you very much. And in terms of how they ranked, so we did an assessment on different aspects. It was about 12 different aspects that we looked at. One of them was land ownership and negotiation. So yes, that if there was, we count all the parcels of land ownership along each segment, so that would have scored the segment down significantly, because we know how difficult it can be, and how it can sometimes impede the process. So yes, that is partly why. However, the council had already told us that there were priority sections that would be considered out with our assessment. So we did try and highlight that regardless, that was a priority section, but it might have not scored particularly well because of some deliverability and maintainability aspects, essentially. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And sort of the final thing, really, my comment, and to echo some of what's been said already, in Appendix A, from page 46 onwards, there's a lot of emphasis on car park enhancements and improvements, but it would be really nice to see more emphasis given on integration with public transport. And there are the train station at Gretna and the train station at Stranraer, which are coastal and great entry points, but there's various mentions in the piece comparing to the West Highland Way. The vast majority of people that walk the West Highland Way get there using public transport, and it would be perfectly possible to do that on this route, but we need to promote that. We need to make it really clear. We need to make it simple for people to find out when the bus stops and where it stops to get on and off the route in sections. So I'd be really keen to see that much better promoted and built into the plans from the start.
Thank you, Laura. Anything to add, Grant, to Laura's sort of request?
Nothing further to add. Thanks.
Okay, Willie?
Just a point of clarification, maybe for Jimmy. I wasn't suggesting that the community take over what is a multi-million-pound project should we be successful. What I meant there was that there's buy-in, there's stakeholders in the whole route, but not to be responsible for the maintenance or anything, Jimmy. So I hope you're comforted by that remark.
I'm sure Jim's taken that on board. With that, we'll just move to the recommendations, which to approve the presentation, which we did do, and thanks, Georgia, for that presentation. 2 was to note the update on the progress of the SCAMP project Natural Heritage Lottery application. Oh, Keith, you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, Chair. Just on that second recommendation, actually, there seemed very little mention of the SCAMP project in that report. There's about 130 pages. There's a mention of it at the beginning and there's a mention of it at the end. And I know that Brian mentioned something about having just put in the National Heritage Lottery. Could we just get a little bit of amplification of where we are with the for that second recommendation? Thanks.
Okay, Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. As I mentioned, the Coastal Path project is a sub-project within the wider Solway Coast and Marine project. I can send you details because obviously we just submitted last week, but I can send the board details of where we are with that and some maps and infographics as well. We submitted last week a bid up to, just under £8 million to the Landscape Connections programme, which is a new programme for the National Lottery. And we've been in discussions with the lottery for basically the last year on this bid. And we've been made aware that we're the only bid from Scotland for this UK-wide programme. So we think we stand a fair chance of success on that. And the £8 million we're looking at to be matched with, the whole project is going to be about £25 million over over 10 years. Now, the Coast Path is one of a number of projects within a suite within the SCAMP project. So there's community activities, there's habitat restoration, interpretation, all sorts of things. So it's a holistic sort of project to actually improve the coastal communities in terms of access infrastructure, but also nature conservation and measures to mitigate the biodiversity and climate crisis on the coast as well.
Thanks, Brian. Has that been helpful, Keith?
That is, yeah, and I think it would be really helpful if board members could get the sort of general outline so that we can see how this the footpath, the core footpath, and fits into the whole project. That'd be really helpful. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks, Brian. I mean, I suppose we're forever looking for financial benefits from anywhere. If there's money out there, let's apply for it. And Laura did make a couple of suggestions there. So every pound's helpful in going towards these projects. Jim, is it on the same point, or was yours going to be on number 3, recommendation 3?
It was in both, Chair. On the second one, I wondered where the Coastal Communities Fund sits, because I don't see any reference to that. I know there's Heritage Lottery Fund, and I thought the Coastal Communities Fund was specifically set aside by the Scottish Government for coastal communities. It seems to me that that sits perfectly with that fund. And I'd also like to see, just for, well, I think all board members are interested, for my idle curiosity, if you like, where all we've applied for funding to, because it's very often the case that the council or the coastal funds is the easiest one to go to because it's located in our region. And I know Brian just said there's a national bid that he's confident will be successful about, but I wouldn't mind at some stage seeing a list of whom we've applied to and for what element, and then onto agenda or recommendation 3. So I'll wait and let you deal with 2 now. I'll come back in 3, Chairman, if that's all right.
Yes, yeah, thanks, Jim. Yeah, Brian, I don't know, is that something that also could be looked at, the Coastal Benefit Fund?
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Yes, we'll be looking at all funding sources, all possible funding sources. What we're looking at is that the Heritage Lottery be sort of the anchor funder for the whole of the Solway Coast and Marine project, and then obviously applying for other funders based on the, well, hopefully we will get that, and that will add to that. But it'll be quite an iterative process. I think as the project develops, we'll look at all funding opportunities, and yes, the Coastal Communities Fund will be one of those.
Thanks, Brian. And recommendation 3 was consider March funding for the Gretna to Cairnryan Coastal Path from the SWestrans capital expenditure of 25-26 at the June 2025 board meeting, pending budgets. And Jim, you wanted to come in on that one?
I have no issue with the sentiment applied, and I think it's an ideal project that we should support. I just wonder what the inference is in the recommendation, because I would want to see that would be considered in line with all other applications to this fund, so we're not exclusively setting ourselves up for a bid to the funding that will be guaranteed. And I would also want to see it applied year on year rather than us commit to a 10-year programme, because we don't know what other quality projects might be coming forward, and who knows what might happen in the future with funding. So I would want to see that ensured that it's no exclusive. It should simply read in line with all other applications at that time, and for a year-on-year basis rather than commit for a 10-year programme. And I know it doesn't say that in the paper, Chair, but that's the inference.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. But I did notice that in the implications, the financial one, on an incremental basis as opposed to a long-term commitment, this will be a decision for the board. And if you scroll down to risk management, you know, obviously there is a clear financial risk in the long-term commitment, but the board is asked to consider the missing link. But we're being asked in the recommendations pending budgets. So I think, are you trying to look for a little bit of assurance that we don't get ourselves tied up in knots here?
Both that, Chairman, and an assurance that we're not excluding any other bids, because it seems to me that we are saying this application or this request will be taken in isolation. That's what I read into it. It might not be the intention of the language, but I would want to ensure that it doesn't exclude other bids and that it's for a one-year allocation only, because we only get our money year on year.
Yep, thanks. Just before I bring Keith in, can we seek that assurance, says either Grant or Brian? Can you give reassurance to the board?
I'll come in here, Chair, thanks. Yeah, I can reassure that we're just looking for support for this project, and it'll be up to the board to decide how much, and when we bring it up back to the board in June, once we know what our budgets are, how much they'd like to contribute, and it's not going to exclude any other projects that we'll be bringing up. But we just like to feel that it's an ambitious project. We think it's important because of the size of the project that the board has sight and has input into this this project before it comes up to you in June. But it will definitely not be excluding any other projects. I'm sure we'll talk about that in the capital expenditure paper coming up soon.
Thanks, Grant. Scott, Brian Scott, sorry. Have you anything to add to what Grant said?
Yes, yeah, I agree with that, and I realise obviously the year-to-year budgets that we all have to live with. One thing I'd just like to say is that at this stage, what I would request, if possible, from the board is, from the outcome of this discussion, is at least a letter, in principle, letter of support that we can actually send to the Heritage Lottery to say that, you know, in principle, you can support the aim of the Coast project, but obviously within the limitations of year-on-year budget and that for that approach.
Thanks. I've got Keith Walters. I'll bring Willie in, and then final say on Jim. So Keith.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on the timing of this. If the National Lottery application is going to get a result in March, and it's going to come to the June meeting, presumably we will already have committed ourselves to a capital budget for 25-26. So I'm just a little bit unsure as to how that we can say that we're happy to consider match funding, but will we not have already committed our capital funding for 25-26 by the June meeting? Is there not an opportunity between March and the June meeting to have it included if that's what we're looking for?
Thanks, Keith. I'll bring Grant in.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Walters, what we do is we prepare proposals for the capital expenditure programme for the 25-26 based on budget figures that we receive approximately, what we best we can do, but it doesn't get approved until June board and until the June board by the board. But in between March and June, it will allow us to look and see what projects are coming forward and how much we could support those projects.
Has that been helpful, Keith?
Well, yeah. So we're saying that the 25-26 budget, which presumably starts on April the 1st, we will be agreeing on the middle of June. Yeah.
That's correct. We don't get to know until the end of April what our budget is.
The end of April, right?
Yeah. The services and departments in the council, we don't get a final figure until the end of April, and then the next board after that's June. We'd be quite happy to have a seminar to go over some of the projects that we're maybe perhaps bringing forward to the June board, to have discussions ahead, if that would be of interest to the board.
I'm open to the board, you know, even if we have a seminar, just enlighten us. Yeah, I'm getting nods online. But we'll come back to that in a minute. Willie and then Jim.
Yeah, Chair, when we're looking at this, and I'm pleased to hear that Brian said that they were looking at all possibility, all funded sources. I think we should be looking at the Levelling Up Fund as well, because this is an ambitious project. And it covers the whole of the region right across. So I would hope that we would be looking at that, given that Levelling Up Fund is still continuing, or believe it's still continuing, and it may be something that we could tap into there, so that we're not putting all our eggs in the one basket in terms of the National Lottery. So there could be much funding there, if that's a possibility. And also to support what Brian was saying, that I would hope the board would give a letter in principle of support for this ambitious, so that he has something to put forward to the lottery. I'm sure we could agree that, Chair.
Thanks, Willie. Final say, Jim?
As far as the Levelling Up Fund goes, the council has submitted fund or applications, and they are in their final stages. And there's one certainly prepared for Annan, and I think SWestrans in it as well. And if part of that is moved towards this project, I don't think anybody would object, but I think it was more about electric vehicles and sustainable transport rather than walking and cycling. But anyway, the point I wanted to make was that the worry I have has been clearly expressed by Brian. He has said he wants us to send a letter. Now, if I were sending a letter, and I'll propose this to you, Chairman, it has to state on the letter that we are unable to make a commitment in this time because we don't know what our budget is. And I wouldn't want officers to go away sending a letter of support and simply working out what proportion of the money we can take from this grant fund that we get annually for this project, because you're then sort of cherry picking, and I don't think that's the right thing to do. We've not had the opportunity to discuss any of the other projects. We don't even know any of them are, so which is maybe why it's a useful thing to have a seminar to learn what the projects are, to see where these projects sit. And I just worry that we're being led, and led is a very maybe sensitive bit of language to use, but we're led into a position where we commit ourselves before we know what we've got and what other projects we have. We shouldn't be looking at these things in isolation at all. I agree we should send a letter of support, absolutely, and we should look to and put in a letter. We were looking to fund or part fund or fund some element of that, but it should be looked to. No undertaking whatsoever made in the correspondence. We shouldn't be asking officers to sort of siphon off a proportion of that money before we see what other projects are put up for our consideration. And I take it at the end of the day, as board members, that they decide what we do and what we don't do.
Thanks, Jim. So there's a proposal. It's a letter of principle. I take it that's what the board is considering at this moment in time. I'm getting nods in the room. Is that supported by other board members? Yeah, I'm getting nods online. Jim, you still got your hand up?
Just provided we don't make an undertaking that we will fund this, because that's the issue I have. was simply, we support the project in principle.
Yeah.
And there were no specific funds laid aside until we see what all the projects are, what's proposed, and we then get a look at them all in some detail. That's my view on this, Chairman.
Yeah, and I think getting the nods online and nods in the room here, I think that's what the board are considering at this moment in time, that we'll just take it as a letter of principle at this moment. Claire, I don't know if you want to record that as a decision.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We can certainly make reference to that in the minute for a decision and make it clear the caveats around that in principle letter support.
So is the board happy with those recommendations being put forward? Yep. Okay, we now move on to agenda item 6, which is the revenue budget monitoring report for 2024-25 for the period ending 31st of October 2024. Janet, this is your report. Have you anything to add?
Nothing further to add, Chair.
Thank you, Janet. I'll open it up to the board. Any questions, comments? Councillor Walters.
Sorry to repeat myself from the last meeting, but I'd asked the question last time about what the detail of the payments were for the 4.1 million, and after a bit of discussion, I was basically given the answer that this was the format, that this was industry standard format. But would it be possible in this report to have some sort of link towards what those payments actually can be broken down into, so that anybody looking at it, for instance, board members who are being asked, what does SWestrans spend 4 million on? So we have some sort of answer, so we could actually say that. That's my question. Thanks.
Thanks, Keith. Janet.
The payments, Councillor, are for the supported bus network, and they are to the bus operators, which would be commercially sensitive information to put the detail, but the 4 million is for the bus operators for the subsidised network.
Thanks, Janet. Has that been helpful, Keith?
Yes, thanks for the confirmation. Yeah.
Okay, if there's no board members, I'll go to observers. Laura?
Yes, thanks. Just a quick question on the buses, which I think are being delivered today or tomorrow based on the report. Do we know what routes they're likely to be operating on?
I don't think it's in the revenue monitoring report. It's just basically the expenditure on all routes that's being covered, as well as all the other expenditures and the income that we receive, whether it's from Scottish Government, D&G, Council for Core Funding, etc., SPT.
It's item 7, Chairman.
Sorry, who's that, Jim?
It's Jim. Laura's talking about agenda item 7.
Oh, sorry, I've skipped ahead on the notes. Apologies.
No, that's okay. Right, I'll bring you in first, and then, well, after the board members have had their say on item 7. So if there's no other questions on item 6, we'll just go to the recommendations, which is to note the forecast outturn for the revenue budget as at 31st October 2024. We're happy to note. Take silence as acceptance. So thanks, Janet, for your report. We'll go to item 7, which is the Capital Expenditure Programme 2024-25/2026-27. It's update. Grant, have you anything to add to the report?
Nothing more to add to the report, Chair. Thanks.
And we've got Peter McCormack. Can you provide a short verbal update on the People in Place programme?
Certainly, thank you, Chair. The programme is now very much underway. All the grants have been allocated and the programmes are up and running. We're currently in, well, we've got some examples of what's happening in the appendices on pages 19 and 35. We're very much in discussion with Transport Scotland at the moment about next year's funding, which looks to be a very similar format with the addition of sustainable travel and also picking up some more community grants that are currently available through Paths for All. So I will be chasing up those community groups that are working locally to make sure that they don't slip between the stools there. Also next year, the local authority fund which we co-deliver as part of the People Place grants is likely to be something very similar. So we're working very much across the whole council to actually make sure that that fully aligns with what we're delivering. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So opening up to board members first. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, I've raised it here, or I've mentioned it here anyway, in terms of the Stranraer station, Stranraer Harbour station, and I know Grant has been in Stranraer making a presentation in terms of transport hub through active travel that's referred to here. Just wonder, because the recommendation is to note the update for 24-25 through to 26-27, but there's no reference in here to just how far we are with that. It does have two schools of thought to move the station further nearer to the town, using the bottom part of the harbour. But as it stands just now, it's just no a welcoming place to either to access the railway station or coming off it, particularly in the winter and the dark nights. And the other point I would ask here is to do with active travel and pathways. One from coming off the ferry at Cairnryan. You just wonder where that is in the grand scale of things, with it asking about the Swalt.
Thanks, Willie. Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Scobie. First of all, regarding the Stranraer railway station, there seems to be a bit of a momentum. There's a lot of political momentum, and there's a number of stakeholders, in particular Network Rail and ScotRail, are all seem to put in a bit more focus, a bit more concentration, and it seems to be gone up the list of priorities now for Network Rail. We've got a seat at the table. Unfortunately, we weren't able to make the meeting at 18th of November, but we'll make sure that we're there at the next meeting. But certainly, there's a lot more communication going on. I want to manage your expectations, Councillor Scobie, but the people were in the room and they're now talking about it. So it's a start. It's a start. And as far as the pathways regarding, sorry, it was the pathway for, sorry, Cairnryan
to Stranraer.
Yeah.
There's a gap that we had committed to. And Brian has spoken to the Community Council on this one. Yeah. And it's really, where are we with that one?
That's Amy. Amy were Amy's path, and they, by all accounts, they've been working with Transport Scotland to make sure that that path, there's a path there at the moment, but it's got breaks in it, and it needs to be maintained and repaired. And that, the last time I spoke to them, it was a wee while ago, they were going ahead and getting that work done. I can certainly chase up with Amy. We know the contacts were involved in that. No problem.
That would be appreciated, Chair, if it could, that one on the pathway, if that could be chased up with Amy, because it is a trunk road, accepting that would be their responsibilities. And just on the Stranraer station, it'd be good to get that on the agenda, Chair, just what progress is being made on that at some point.
Yeah, is that something that you can take offline at the moment, Willie? Because
I'm happy with the report that Grant made, but it's so that we keep a track of it in terms of how it's developing, because this is a major project for as part of the East Pier in Stranraer.
Can you accommodate that, Grant?
Yeah, Chair, I'm happy to keep Councillor Scobie updated personally on it, and I can bring a report back to, as soon as we've got any progress, I can bring a report back to the board and include it in the capital.
I think that's acceptable.
Councillor
Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's good that we're replacing buses. I think we need to keep our fleet up to standard, because one of the important things is to make our customers comfortable and the service reliable. as an aside, and maybe not for today, where are we with the suggestion that we should move to some electric buses where they could support small local routes and in that way become more energy efficient, deal with the climate challenge and be cheaper to run in the long run. But that's not for today. I'm just delighted to see the buses are coming and I hope we continue to refresh our buses as the years go on. My question's about active travel on page 17. There's only one red line in the whole programme of active travel, and it's quite multiverse the correct multiverse path. Waiting for permission from the landowner. It's the landowner that's promoting the path. They own no only the land, but correct multiverse. It's Buccleuch Estate, so I don't understand why that is, but I'll chase that up, Chairman. I'm just concerned that there's some misunderstanding somewhere because I can't believe that the landowner would object to the path that they're promoting to a feature that they own. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. I don't know if Grant's got a response to that.
Thanks, Councillor Dempster, and really appreciate it if you could help chase that up. I've got my colleague Keith Munn is involved with regarding that pathway. I don't know if Keith, if you want anything else you want to add. Oh, sorry, Chair.
Thanks, Grant. And just on the point about the electric buses, did we not apply for LUF funding?
Yes, we did, and we're hoping to bring a report to the board once the LUF report's gone to the council, which will have a lot of the details regarding the LUF bid, along with paths and mobility hubs that are going to be throughout the region.
Yeah, I can't remember how many buses. Was it about
16.
16 buses,
16
electric buses.
And they're all going to have a cater for bikes as well.
Thanks very much, Grant. If there are no more board members, I'll go to Laura, which I promised, being an observer. Laura, do you want to come in on this one?
Yes, this is the one I was asking the question on about the 9 buses that have been delivered, presumably today or tomorrow, if not before. Do we know what routes they're going to be used on? And are the 16 other buses additional, or is this 9 part of those 16 that we applied for funding for?
Grant, have you got a response?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Laura. We don't yet know exactly what the routes of the new buses are going to go on. We're still in talks regarding that with operators and with our own. And regarding the 16 buses, we did identify some routes for the bids, but that may change. We've also got to look at the infrastructure. We've got some funding for the electric vehicle infrastructure for buses, in particular to situate some chargers in rural areas, which will not be just strictly for buses, but maybe operational for other vehicle users. But yes, once we have identified, we're going through it in the middle of a bus review at the moment, so there's no guarantee the routes will remain the same. But once we bottom out with the bus review, once we know when the buses are going to be coming in, again we'll be talking with the operators and with our own services and to identify those routes, and in particular looking at where the infrastructure will be located also. Thank you.
Thanks, Grant. I don't have any other speakers coming in, so we'll go to the recommendations, which is to note the update on the capital programme for 2024-25 to 2026-27 as outlined in the report. We're happy to note. I'll take silence as acceptance. Move on to item 8, which is the Climate Change Duty Report 2023-24. Again, Grant, have you anything to add to this?
Nothing more to add, Chair, thanks.
Okay, I'll open it up to board members. Councillor Walters.
Yeah, thanks for this. I've just got a couple of questions on the spreadsheet we were sent as a separate part of the report. And apart from the question of why is the spreadsheet so unfriendly, which I'd imagined was because it's been set in a format by somebody else. I think presumably Scottish government. But there's a couple of details on one on the spreadsheet where it says boundary information, and it mentions that SWestrans have vehicles that are not electric, which are owned by SWestrans, which I thought would be, I wasn't quite sure what that referred to, so it'd be useful to find that out. And also, it also says that the SWestrans hasn't used the climate change assessment tool. And I just wondered if that was something we might plan to do, or whether it was something that Dumfries and Galloway Council might be intending to do. That's the two questions from, like I say, from the spreadsheet pages. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. No, it was discussions with myself, the Vice Chair, and because we were agreeing to submit a climate change duties report, nobody had seen the report. So that was the reason why we got the report, but that's the way it comes in, is in a spreadsheet format. I don't think we've had it in the past, but it was just something that was requested so that board members can have a look and see what's actually in the report. I don't know if you could assist Councillor Walters with that, Grant.
I'm happy to take those points back to Kirsty Dunsmore, who's unfortunately not able to be here today, and have some answers for yourself, Councillor Walters, if that's okay in the meantime.
Yeah, that's fine, yeah. Thanks very much.
Yeah, and maybe perhaps to share that with the rest of the board, you know, the questions that Keith raised. So if there's no board members, I'll go to observers. Don't see any hands going up. Okay, we'll just move to the recommendations, which is to note the update. Note the SWestrans statutory climate duties reporting requirements, and to agree to submit the 23-24 climate change duties report as by the deadline of 30th of November 2024. We are happy to note and agree. Take silence as acceptance. Now move on to item 9, which is the bus shelter programme update. Linda, this is your report. Have you anything to add to your report?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Okay, I'll open it up to board members. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, I'm sure Linda's got it in hand. I got that assurance earlier today. We've just built a new bus shelter in Charlotte Street in Stranraer, and it's getting that finalised in terms of the seat that's required in it, and I know Linda dealt with a work that was quite dangerous and unsafe to take away a protruding pipe. But when we are putting in these bus shelters, we need to see that they are finalised or finished as quickly as possible and usable for the travelling public.
Yeah, Councillor Scobie, usually the works are all complete. This has just been an exception. I think it was the groundworks that delayed everything on that day, then an out of time, and they just need to come back. Usually the work is done quite easily, probably in half a day, you know, so it's just unfortunate in this case, but they're being chased for it, and hopefully they'll get there sooner rather than later to finish it.
It's maybe just unfortunate that it's right in the middle of the tune.
Thanks, Willie. Thanks, Linda. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Nothing other than to record my thanks to Linda for sorting out the bus shelter in Sanker High Street and the dangerous one at Bennock. And I know I sympathise with Linda because she has to commission the work through the council's road transport or the councillors or the Dumfries and Galloway Council staff, so sometimes it's not in Linda's control when these things are done. But no, I'm pleased my two are done. They're very good, and the users are very much appreciated by that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. respond, Linda.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
Just before I bring you in, Keith, there was a couple of points I'd like to raise. Obviously, the first one is in 3.6, right at the very bottom of the paragraph. That's on page 41. This is proven problematic due to resources, and then we go to 3.8, which is the bus shelter. The contract for the bus shelter expires in December 2024. Currently, there's a sole supplier, but then it goes on to say that SWestrans will be looking to tender our supply and installation of bus shelters, maintenance and cleaning of stops and shelters, bus shelters and stops, accessories, etc., etc. Now, my understanding is that we supply or renew bus shelters, but then it becomes an asset of the council, and it's their responsibility for the maintenance and upkeep of these. Is that suggesting that that maintenance and upkeep is then therefore going to be, an expenditure for SWestrans, extra cost or whatever? It's not quite clear in the report. That is one of the points I'd like to raise. The second one was in the costings in the appendix. I was looking at one of the new ones, £8,500, but the majority of them are around about 4 or 5, maybe 4.5 to 5,500. I'm just wondering why that one was almost double the cost of other bus shelters. I'll leave that in your capable hands to respond, Linda.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, SWestrans are responsible for installation and that, and then they become a council asset, and Dumfries and Galloway Council are meant to look after the maintenance going forward. I know that they get a very limited budget to do that in, and they've got very limited resources now. So since I came to post, I've sort of been doing a lot of the additional works, the extras, civils work, putting up poles and signing and things, rather than getting chased myself and then having to chase roads because they just aren't getting to the work. So after a meeting and discussion with Grant and that, we thought if we send out a tender and it includes civils and additional works as well and ongoing maintenance, there is that opportunity for us to call on an external contractor to maybe do the work for us if things are going on for weeks and weeks and not being dealt with in-house because the council just don't have the resources. And as I say, last year, for instance, the budget ran out pretty early in the year for bus shelter maintenance for the council. So that's when we had to pick up a wee bit extra and do some of the work that was coming through as complaints and things. So that's why we thought this gives us another option to carry out this work ourselves. And we've got contractors there that we can call on to do the work, because we have 1,000 bus stops and shelters out there, and the council's roads department just can't be everywhere and do this work for us. And the second thing that you raised, Chair, was that 8,500, that was for 2 bus shelters. They were on opposite sides of the road. Okay.
No, that makes sense for the cost on that one. It just looked like a discrepancy. Grant, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thanks. Again, regarding us doing the work doesn't necessarily always mean that we'll pay for that work. It's a discussion that's still to be had between ourselves and Roads Department.
Thank you. Councillor Walters. Keith.
Actually, Chair, you've just covered one of my points about the tendering, because I was surprised that we were looking to tender for something which is covered by DG Council. But I can see the explanation behind that. Although it'd be interesting, we don't want to be ending up spending money on something that we're expecting DG Council to cover. The other issue is if the existing contract runs out at the end of December, are we not leaving it a bit late to re-tender? Are we going to be able to get the re-tender process resolved in December, so that if we do need to start on the process, we can start it in the new year? And I've got one particular question about Appendix 2, the draft bus shelter programme. I suppose the general question is how are these projects being prioritised Because obviously there's probably presumably there's a lot longer list behind that, and being sort of parochial for a change, when I looked at the Annan Road one, the Dumfries Annan Road Brasswell opposite the industrial estate, much as I think people would welcome that, there's also quite a bit of local demand for a bus shelter in Alderman Hill Road, to facilitate pupils coming out to St Joseph's College and waiting there. And I just wondered how I had seen that on the list before, that particular bus shelter. I just wondered how we've ended up with that list as opposed to any other list. Thanks.
Thanks, Keith. Linda.
Thank you, Councillor Walters. We've nearly completed the strategy document with procurement for the tendering process, and if it's not out just before the end of this year, it'll be out at the beginning of January, the actual tender documents, and we'll expect to get these back in by the end of January at the latest, all being well. But as I say, we've nearly completed it. Keith has been assisting, and we've nearly got that finalised, so there should only maybe be a month delay getting the tenders back. But the current contract, although it finishes at the end of December, they do still have 2 or 3 items still to complete for us, which they'll be obliged to do because they've already received orders for them. Regarding, sorry, apologies, what was, oh yes, the Annan Road. What actually happened there, that was a request. I got 2 or 3 requests for that one, Councillor Walters, and I scored it as per our scoring system above. And what's actually happening is because of the new offices that have gone in there, a lot of people have been reported as standing in the rain and actually on the opposite side on the wet verge. And because it's a busy road there, I was asked to give it a wee bit priority. So I put it onto the programme and scored it accordingly. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of buses, and it got, and because of the new offices and that, and the rumour, well, not a rumour, I think it's at, they're currently consulting on a new McDonald's, and there's the Premier Inn or that there. So there's been a lot more people standing about on that main road, and that's why it was added on. But the rest of them should all have been historically been on the list and been scored, and they've made it onto the main list now. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. I was just thinking, is there a proper mechanism that elected members or even members of the public, can try and get these bus shelters on the programme? I'm not sure. Is there something on our website? Maybe you can help me on that.
I'm not sure, Chair. What usually happens is they just email the SWestrans mailbox, and I assess each one individually if there's a need for it, and then if there is a need either for a new stop or a new shelter, it goes on the programme, and then it sits where it's scored, and that's when we decide on the priority for it.
And if elected members were put in an EMAS, for example, would that also be taken forward through the programme?
Yes, it would.
Keith, I see you come back on.
I think you've just taken my thing again, because I wasn't suggesting that the Annan Road one wasn't useful, and I think it will be useful if you. I was just interested to know how things are getting on this list as the final. You've got the scoring process, and as the chair has just pointed out, it'd be quite useful perhaps if we knew, or if we were able to advertise to people how to suggest areas, because, like I said, the Alderman Hill Road one, for instance, I know has been around for a good number of years before I became a councillor. So it'd be quite useful to know how long this list is, and where this, how people might be able to prioritise things on that list. Thanks.
Thanks, Keith. If there's no other board members, Laura Moody, did you want to come in on this item?
Yeah, and actually relates to the previous point. I recall the scored list and prioritisation mechanism from a previous meeting I went to. I was wondering if it would be possible to add the ranking number, maybe in brackets, of the on the document of the completed ones, so that we can all then see what order they're being done in, and if there's a new entrant on the chart, as it were. And to echo the points made, it would be really good for people to know how they can contact SWestrans or alert people to the need to upgrade a bus stop.
Yep, thanks, Laura. I've seen Linda's nodding away there, so yeah, taking that on board. So if there are no further questions, we'll go to recommendations, which is 1, note the update of the 24-25 bus shelter programme, and 2, agree the bus shelter programme 25-26 as shown in the appendix 2. Are we happy to note and agree? Yep. I'll take silence as acceptance. Now move on to agenda item 10, which is the rail update. Grant, have you anything to add to this report?
Nothing further to add, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Grant. I'll open it up to board members. Councillor Scobie, Willie?
Yeah, Chair, maybe Grant could write to ScotRail, but I've been contacted regarding the offer made by ScotRail, Network Rail, in terms of Stranraer, where it's 2 for 1. The person had a letter in the local paper when trying to access this offer. Then the person is finding great difficulty, as I'm sure others will likewise. And it is really just to bring this to the attention of ScotRail, that maybe, you know, their offer is not as accessible as it should be, because you've got to go online, seemingly, to access this. And just to raise it with ScotRail, if there is a problem with it, to rectify as soon as, please.
Yeah, happy to do that, Councillor Scobie. Thank you.
Thanks, Grant. Thanks, Willie. Don't see any other hands going up. We'll just go to recommendations, which is 1, note the update on the full-time table return on ScotRail services, 2, ScotRail station opening hours, and 3, December 2024 ScotRail timetable update. We're happy to note all 3. Okay, silence is acceptance. Item 11, which is standing orders, annual review. Claire, do you have anything to add?
No, nothing to add. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll open it up to board members. Don't see anyone coming in. Observers. No one coming in. Okay, we'll just go to recommendations. So is 1 is consider and agree whether the protocol for the provisions of the lead officer by Dumfries and Galloway Council to the South West of Scotland Transport Partnership should be added as an appendix to the standing orders, and 2, consider and agree whether there should be any alterations to the standing orders. Claire, do you want to come in?
Chair, so are we agreeing to add the appendix, and are we agreeing that the standing orders require no further alteration?
I take it as what the board's agreeing, so I take silence as acceptance. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Claire. Agenda item 12. Any other business deemed urgent by the Chair due to the need for a decision. I have no further items of business today that require an urgent decision. Item 13 is the exclusion of the press, members of the public and observers. It is recommended that the members of the board agree to consider the following item of business in private and exclude the press, members of the public, observers from the meeting, given that the report contains confidential or exempt information in respect of paragraphs 6, 8, 9. Sorry, Willie.
Maybe before you do that and agree to exclude the public, I did get a letter from, or an email from Grant, I think it was yesterday, just regarding the 500 service from Stranraer to Dumfries and vice versa, in terms of comfort breaks or toilets on the vehicles that are being used. It's quite complex in terms of increased cost of that. rather than deal with it, Chair, I would ask that we get a report on this, because it's not only the Stranraer 500 service, but it was in relation to long distance services that we were asking that there be comfort breaks built into the service, and recognising the work that Grant has put into this to get a response from the contractor. I think we need a report so that we can see where we're going with long distance routes.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I've raised in the past as well, and I totally accept what you're saying there. And I think that would probably be the appropriate route, is to have a report brought back to this board so that we can have a full discussion with all the information, if that's acceptable. Thank you. Okay, right. It is recommended that the members of the board agree to consider the following item of business and private. I've already been through all that. Paragraph 6, 8 and 9 of Schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Can we agree to exclude the press, public and observers? Yep. Okay.